Hey, have you heard? I'm going back to Las Vegas and the Punk Rock Museum to give guided tours. This happens to coincide with the When We Were Young Festival. I'll be there over the course of 4 days, October 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. 2 tours a day, one at 1:30 p.m. and one at 4:30 p.m. These tours will sell out. Space is limited, so grab your tickets now at thepunkrockmuseum.com. I got stories for days, and I can't wait to share them with you. So don't miss your chance to walk the halls of the museum and share punk rock memories with me. Head over to thepunkrockmuseum.com and get your tickets now. See you soon. This episode is brought to you by DistroKid. Hey everyone, on today's episode, co-host Chris Fafalios and I bring you Legends Amplified, where we're honoring legendary producer, the late, great Roy Thomas Baker. Roy passed away earlier this year on April 12, 2025. He was an absolute anomaly, a visionary way ahead of his time. Roy took his first job as a 14-year-old boy at Decca Records in 1960, and miraculously connected the dots to not only some of the most well-known names in music, but later becoming the in-house producer at CBS Records, before being given the post of Senior Vice President of A&R at Elektra Records. Roy Thomas Baker brought to life such amazing acts as Queen, The Cars, Journey, and Free, allowing each band to maintain their own unique signature sound, without homogenizing their recordings. It was producers like Roy, whose endless hours of experimentation, creativity, and heart blazed the trail for all of the music we've been able to enjoy for the last 70 years. For that, I'm forever grateful. Mr. Roy Thomas Baker, may you rest in peace.
Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast.
In researching this, Chris, my trusted confidant, producer, and co-host, told me he couldn't find a lot outside of his producing career. He's kind of a private person, and we're going to keep this as Roy Thomas Baker centric as we can, but it may veer off quite like our other podcast, Chris, The After Party, which you can find over at chrisdemakes.com. For those living under a rock, if you listen to this show, you know what The After Party is. It's how we keep the lights on here. It's basically our Patreon over there where you can sign up for bonus episodes of The After Party, and sometimes Chris comes in with these great notes and we get in on a topic of the after party, and then by the end of it we're talking about something completely not even in the same league. So we're going to do our due diligence here to keep it Roy Thomas Baker centric, but interesting character, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I couldn't find a lot about the personal life of Roy Thomas Baker, really. Everything I found of him were videos of him in the studio, a lot of Queen stuff. I saw a lot of behind-the-scenes Queen stuff with him. I think his work speaks for itself, but I don't know much about the man beyond that. I know you read a lot of music biographies. Do you know anything about the man, Roy Thomas Baker, beyond his production work?
And not too much. You know, I learned a little bit in the Queen movie. They touched on him a little bit. Roy Thomas Baker was born on November 10th, 1946 in Hampstead, England. And Chris, the second thing you wrote down here, he began his career at Decca Records at the age of 14.
Right.
So this would have been 1960. What was he doing at Decca Records as a 14-year-old? Was he stuffing record envelopes? Was he cleaning toilets? Was he washing the floors after everyone left? What was going on, you think?
I really don't know. I think maybe shadowing and interning there. Is that what was going on? Or like you said, was he just getting coffee or what was he doing? I don't know.
Right. And I think a lot of this episode is going to be you and I as waxing philosophical and, trying to figure out what you do in 1960. There was no blueprint here, Chris. for any of this? How did a 14-year-old kid walk? Hey, I'm going to go by the Decca office today and cruise in and see if they have a job for me. And how would a 14-year-old know there was a job there? Who pointed him in that direction? Did he have an uncle that knew somebody that worked in the building?
Right. I have no idea. This is the kind of stuff that I was really curious about. And Chris, I even went down like a YouTube rabbit hole with this, trying to figure out what his beginnings were, why he was interested in music, and I really couldn't find anything beyond stuff in the studio with this guy.
Mm-hmm. So, by 14 years old, and I know you were very well into, listening to music, and you didn't know it then. I maybe didn't realize it then, but we were dissecting music and processing it and whatnot. But there wasn't a lot to go on in 1960. Rock and roll was in its absolute infancy. One of the other things you had written here, and this is surprising in one sense, that Decca Records is a British record label. It was established in 1929. So we're talking like old standards in classical music, maybe, jazz, old contemporary stuff. But this is very interesting because, again, rock and roll was in its infancy. This kid, it amazes me that he would have the forethought to walk into a record label.
Yeah, well, I guess Decca Records, it would make sense that you would know what it was because it did release music from so many popular artists. Bing Crosby, Buddy Holly, Elvis, Chuck Berry, Johnny Cash, the Rolling Stones eventually. It also had, like, Decca was an English label, but it also had an American spin-off of it. But it was like probably one of the few labels where you're like, yeah, I know what this label is. So maybe that was the connection. Maybe he saw the Decca Records logo. You've talked about looking at logos on the back of albums when you were a kid and reading the liner notes and stuff. I can only assume that that's how he ended up in this place as a kid.
Sure. And let's talk about the pace at which information in 1960 was gathered, okay? This kid's in an office, and they're sitting there. And then they look over and they say, hey, insert whatever band. Bill Haley and his Comets, that 45 we have coming in, those records are supposed to be delivered today. Okay, So they're sitting there waiting. The records, they have all the sleeves. They're waiting to pack the records, and it didn't happen. So now they're wondering what's going on. They're trying to call the post office or whatever. They also have to call the record stores. Did they call each record store? Did they have a rep that handled 10 record stores at a time? How did they connect these dots, Chris? It's remarkable to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I would assume that it was a lot more back then, obviously. Pen and paper, calling on the phone. Hey, we need 20 more of these records. A lot of personally knowing, probably a lot of the ways that think about the small punk rock labels of the 90s and early 2000s. They probably knew the 2 or 3, indie record stores in each city that you got to get your records into. And I would imagine that's a way that this was operating back in the 60s. By the 80s and 90s, it was a big corporate thing.
Oh, sure.
For all the big albums.
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. And let's look at the places where this was happening. It was LA, New York, and London. That was it. So London, to your point, okay, we know there's a courier here that can get stuff from across town. He's on a bicycle or however he's traveling, so we know we can get stuff across. We have a guy that can print on the spot. We know a record pressing plant that can turn records around in 2 days. So you just start building your team around you, so to speak. But it's just baffling. Even when Less Than Jake got signed in the mid-90s, people were faxing things back and forth, which wasn't optimal.
Right. Yeah, and I can only imagine that in these years, from 14 years old, which, Chris, I don't know when you started playing guitar. 14's around when I picked up a bass for the first time and started making music. Well, this guy decided to go into the recording side of things. Hey, I wish I would have got more into recording at 14 years old. I was more worried about playing in a garage band with my friends, but he got a jump start on that. That's young. That's young to be working in a studio.
It is to get your foot in the studio, but to have that that gumption to want to do so. I mean, Chris, do you know how much it cost back then to put a studio together? Let's say he wanted to, you know what, I'm gonna start putting a microphone collection together, ribbon mics and things back then. They were $100, $200, dollars or more. I mean, everything, studio costs. You remember when Punchline first started recording?
Sure.
Some of these studios were $50, $100, $200 an hour that you were walking into.
Right.
So the whole thing's amazing. I wish, again, we're kind of surmising a lot of this, but I imagine a lot of it went down the way we're speaking of it.
Yeah, I imagine it's like anything. You walk in there and you're getting people coffee, and then a couple years in, you're picking up things, you're sitting at the board, now you're engineering all of a sudden, now you're picking up tips for producing bands, you're seeing how other people work, and probably if you start when you're 14, by the time you're 18, you've picked up a lot of things. You know your way around a studio. And that's what I can surmise of what I've learned about Roy Thomas Baker's early years, is that he picked up a lot of things. And eventually he was encouraged by producer Gus Dudgeon, he did a lot of work on Elton John's acclaimed recordings. He moved to a place called Trident Studios in Soho, which is a district in the West End of London, where he worked with Gus. And then from there, he's working in the studio with people like Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Frank Zappa. So, he's really thrown into the fire at a pretty young age at this point.
Well, in Soho, I don't know if you've ever been there, Chris. It's a really, you mentioned it's in the West End of London, a district, but it's always been the party district. It's the hip place, the cool clothing shops, the cool record stores, things of that nature. It's kind of like New York. It's the area of London that doesn't sleep. So he was definitely in good company there. And I also feel like even if he was 14, he started out as a gopher, and that's what we call studio cats that get their first job. You go for coffee, go for prints, go for this, go for that. Even if he started off as that, he was paying attention from the very first time he got there. He might have been grabbing a cup of coffee for somebody, but he was looking over at the meter on that board and looking where it was at. And he was noticing where things were positioned. And he was starting to ask questions. If I were to guess, hey, what does that mic do? Why do you have that placed back behind the amp? Why do you have a pillow in that bass drum? Why, and so on and so forth. He's that inquisitive kid. There's no way he was just sitting back not asking questions.
By this point, Chris, once he's over at Trident Studios, he's part of the recording process with bands like the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, The Who, Nazareth, Santana, the Mothers of Invention, T-Rex. Like, he is around so many of the most influential and inventive artists. I mean, geez, Frank Zappa. I mean, you're working with Rolling Stones, who are making songs that resonate with everybody, to working with experimental artists like Frank Zappa. So he's seeing the full range of people using the studio to its maximum capacity, and people pushing the boundaries of things, which we'll eventually get to with pushing boundaries here in this episode.
Right. And, something else I've always loved about Roy Thomas Baker is that every band that I've heard him produce, he approaches them as a unique band, as you should. Every band, every human's different. How many producers have you heard where they just run it through the same, compressors, they run it through the same filters and the same plugins and everything else, and it kind of has this homogenized sound. And look at the bands he worked with. I can't even go, well, yeah, the snare drum there sounded like the snare drum on this recording. No, he individualized everything, and we'll get into some of that when we start talking about some of the songs that he produced. But to be able to go in, and we've posed this question before, Chris, to be able to go in and work with bands such as Queen and the Cars and the whole list of bands here, he went in and we talked about this before. How important was he to these songs? Would these songs have lived on and attracted people, brought people's hearts into it, and been a legacy all these years?
Well, I mean, I think that's why we wanted to highlight him with this episode today, was because would someone else be able to bring the vision of someone like Freddie Mercury to life the way that he did? I mean, these people, you and I know who Roy Thomas Baker is. Big music fans know who he is. But a lot of people might know Queen, and they probably know Freddie Mercury. they might not even know who Brian May is or the other guys in Queen. And then take it another, like, what percentage of people that are maybe be a fan of Queen even know the name Roy Thomas Baker? I think that's a big part of why I wanted to do this episode, was to shine some light on someone who's so important to these songs that are these legendary songs. I mean, the dude produced some of the most legendary, greatest rock and roll songs ever put to tape.
Right. And it was a lot easier to kind of be behind the scenes in the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s. You know, what producer picture was getting in Hit Parader or the magazines back in the day, Rolling Stone, like, hey, here's producer so-and-so. That kind of came later. I mean, yeah, we heard of George Martin and this and that, but what did these guys look like? No, they were putting Freddie Mercury on the cover of the magazine. They weren't putting Roy Thomas Baker. So they were kind of sitting back. I could see him, you know, walking down a beach with his family, vacationing somewhere, and just the biggest Queen fan walks by with a shirt on and has no idea who this guy is, or has no idea how prominent he was of a fixture with creating these songs.
Which isn't to take anything away from, in this instance, the band Queen. If it wasn't for the songs that Queen wrote, then, you know, it's not like you could just make these magical productions out of thin air, but it was the combination of these amazing songs. Don't you wonder, like, what if there was a different producer, what Bohemian Rhapsody would have sounded like?
Yeah, I mean, maybe someone would have come along, Chris, and been like, this is just too boisterous. It's too out there. We gotta, you know, this 9-minute song, whatever. And we gotta tighten this up. It can only be 3 minutes. This whole operatic section, you're out of your mind.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. I want to bring up. I did watch a little interview of Roy Thomas Baker talking about the recording of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Freddie was sitting in his apartment, and he said, "I've got this idea for a song." And he sort of sat down and sort of started playing the song, and it was all going along good, and he sort of, you know, he had some words missing and some bits of melodies still hadn't quite worked out, but it was just a basic framework of the song. Then he said he was playing away, and he stopped and said, "Now, dears, this is where the opera section comes in." I went, oh my God. so we said, oh, okay, fine. This is the opposite. And it was just going to be, at the time, a little brief interlude of a little bit of, you know, a few little things like Galileos. So we said, oh, okay, fine. Stick a few little Galileos, and then we get on to like the rock part of the song.
I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me.
When we started doing the opera section properly, it just got longer and longer, and we just kept adding blank tape to this thing, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And every day we sort of thought, oh, this is it, we're done now. And then Freddie would come in with another lot of lyrics and say, I've added a few more Galileos here, dear. And so we'd put on a few more Galileos in, and it just got bigger.
Part of the magic is that Roy was cool with that. He went along with it. He didn't try to talk him out of it. He just rolled with it. And then the song became the magic thing that it became.
Well, I always stop shy of calling what I do or music art, okay? But a lot of people do refer to it as that. And, you know, to be able to take somebody's art and make it better but not change it is and I say not change it, not change the artistic credibility of it. Taking what that person sounds like and magnifying it and making it grander. Not a lot of people can do that. And we're going to get into it. I know the multi-tracking that he did with Queen. There was no digital recording back then. You had to loop, and the time spent in the studios, that's why these records took 6, 8 months, 12 months, a year and a half sometimes to make, doing these kind of productions. I know we had done the episode about Freddie Mercury, and we broke down Bohemian Rhapsody a couple years ago, Chris, and what was it? Something like 120 vocal tracks stacked on there?
It was crazy. It was a crazy amount of stuff that they had to do way before the technology is where we're at today, Chris. I mean, we could open a Logic session or a Pro Tools session and we have pretty much unlimited. As much as the power in your computer can handle, you can have as many tracks as you want. But at the time, you got to bounce stuff down. You got to make some decisions on the fly.
You would have had a 24 channel board that you would have all these vocals on. And then you would have to be like, okay, we're taking all these vocals and we're mixing them down to 2 tracks so that we can open up 22 more tracks to do more vocals on. And you got to commit to those 2 tracks of how the harmonies sit, how they're panned, whatever else. And here's another question. How did he know when he was done? Meaning, okay, we've already stacked 64 harmony vocals on Bohemian Rhapsody. How can you even listen back to those and keep track of them? I have a hard time, Chris, when I got 20 tracks up digitally, I get confused. I'm hitting mute buttons and sends in the wrong area. How are these guys doing it? I know they had great engineers in these studios, but we're talking about some amazing stuff here.
Yeah, I don't know how he balanced or how they decided, oh, this part is done, this song is done. That part is amazing. Also, Chris, you've talked about this many times when talking about producers you've worked with or the many music biographies you've read. These producers also have to be a sort of, I don't know what the word would be, psychologist or something, where can you imagine balancing creating music with some of the egos that you are presented with in the studio? I mean, in Queen, you had everybody was a songwriter, and everyone felt like they wanted to get their songs onto. They touched on that a little bit in the movie or whatever, but everyone had songs they wanted on the record. That's a lot of plates you're balancing as producer. That's a lot of stress.
Yeah, you're a psychologist, you're the mentor, you're the coach. Yeah. You're the manager of the sessions. You're the producer. You're wearing the hat. You're making the decisions, but you're also playing a game. We'll say psychology again, where you, the bass player, I'm the producer, and you're convinced that you're my favorite person in that band, and the singer thinks that he's the favorite, and the guitar player thinks he's the favorite. And the fact of the matter is, I'm just sitting over here trying to get the project done and bring the best out of each individual. We've all seen the movie. We know what he could be like, and a lot of perfectionists are like this. Imagine working with Freddie Mercury on 146 vocal tracks.
I mean, I think that just set the stage for Roy to have an incredible career after that, because if you can do that, if you can work with Freddie, who had these crazy out in outer space, things that have never been done in rock and roll music ideas, and bring them to life, everything had to be easier than that after that.
Well, he co-founded Neptune, which was Trident Studios' label, and that's where Roy met Queen and began a relationship with them that lasted for 5 albums: Queen 1, Queen 2, Sheer Heart Attack, A Night at the Opera, and Jazz. Tons of awards, including 21 Grammys and several Guinness World Records for Bohemian Rhapsody, as deserved. That song is just... and again, you said it a little bit ago. Imagine just sitting there and all of a sudden you're hearing this song that you're already tripping out, and then Freddie goes, oh, now here's where we're going to slide in the operatic section. How do you even do that back then? Because the producer's sitting there going, okay, this is a whole other section of tape. It's not the same song anymore. This intro's over here. I think we even touched on this in the episode. There's no way they sat down and counted that song off and recorded 7.5 minutes or whatever it was. It was it was tracked in pieces, which again, you have to have that mental scope and that forethought back then of how to do that. It's incredible.
Yeah, and of course, we focus a lot here just because we did an entire episode about Bohemian Rhapsody. But we're talking about 5 albums where there was a lot of inventive, creative, just wild ideas that really hadn't been done before. Now, when we're talking about this now, there's been a lot of theatrical bands that have took a page out of Queen and Roy Thomas Baker's book at this point, and there are some workarounds. It's easier to cut and paste things. We're not in there with a knife cutting tape at this point, but this was really, really cool stuff at the time, and this guy should be a household name for what he did with Queen alone. But as you and I both know, it wasn't just Queen.
No, and I've talked about it before. Everyone from Desmond Child to Rob Cavallo, producers. as long as the check's still showing up at their mailbox, most of these guys don't care. They don't want to be the guy on the magazine. They chose the career that they wanted. And sometimes you get people like Holly Knight who tasted a little bit of both sides of it, was a performer and was also a great producer and a great songwriter. A couple other things here that are just unreal. If you just look at the bands, Chris, that Roy Thomas Baker worked with, none of them sound the same.
Nope.
And that's really, really important. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times when you're run through the same cookie cutter of producers, it's like, okay, those vocals sound like that band, and you can really, really hear that. And I'm not going to throw Robert John Mutt Lang under the bus here, but I love his productions. But Roy produced the first 5 Cars records. He produced the first Cars album, Candy-O, Panorama. I take that back. He produced the first, was it 4? No. Candy-O, Panorama, and then Shake It Up. So I guess the first 4 records. And they distinctly sound quirky and like the Cars. When Mutt Lang produced Heartbeat City, listen to the backing vocals on that record and compare them to Pyromania and Hysteria from Def Leppard that he also produced. They sound almost identical. The stacks and how they did those vocals. They sound great in both productions. They work for both. It's awesome. Maybe not many people would have picked up on that, but I don't feel Roy was the kind of producer that did that. Everything sounded different, from the Stones to Bowie, The Who, Nazareth, Santana, Free, T-Rex. None of those bands even sounded remotely like one another.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Hey everybody, we got to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with lots more about Roy Thomas Baker after a few words from our sponsors.
Looking to elevate your music career? DistroKid is a digital music distribution service that enables musicians to distribute their music to online stores and streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, Amazon, Tidal, and many more. DistroKid collects earnings and payments, sending them to you, the artist. With DistroKid, artists unlock a world of possibilities. From easily paying collaborators with splits to securing your music with DistroLock, DistroKid covers all bases. Plus, you can promote your releases with Hyperfollow and create eye-catching visuals with a Spotify Canvas generator, all for free. But that's not all. Introducing the DistroKid app, now available on iOS and Android. Artists can manage their releases, view streaming stats, and withdraw earnings, all from the palm of their hand. And for those looking to perfect their sound, check out Mixia. With its simple interface and customizable mastering options, artists can make their music sound polished and professional within minutes. And don't forget about Instant Share, DistroKid's newest feature. Share large files securely with collaborators, producers, and more, ensuring your music streams at the highest quality. Ready to take your music to the next level? Download the DistroKid app and explore their suite of tools today. Plus, listeners can enjoy 30% off their first year by visiting distrokid.com/VIP/DeMakes. That's distrokid.com/VIP/DeMakes.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of ShopPay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
This episode is brought to you by White Claw Surge. Nice choice hitting up this podcast. No surprises. You're all about diving into tastes everyone in the room can enjoy. Just like White Claw Surge. It's for celebrating those moments when connections have been made and the night's just begun. With bold flavors and 8% alcohol by volume, unleash the night. Unleash White Claw Surge. Please drink responsibly. Hard seltzer with flavors. 8% alcohol by volume. White Claw Seltzer Works. Chicago, Illinois.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Insurance may all seem the same on the surface, but having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like getting a speech from your third cousin's +1 at your wedding when you needed a speech from your best man. You wouldn't settle for just any speech, so don't settle for just any insurance. When it comes to getting the help you need, State Farm is the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. Earn 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. And with a welcome offer of 150,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership, your business can soar to new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just
speaking into the void?
But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Comcast is committed to bringing access to the internet to all Americans, including rural communities across the country, like Sussex County, Delaware.
We were being left behind. Everybody around us seemed to have internet, but we did not. High-speed internet is one of those good things that we needed to help us move our farming, our small businesses, our recreation forward.
Learn more about how we're bringing our next generation network to more people across the country at ComcastCorporation.com/investment in America.
Have you heard the Disgraceland podcast? Do you know about Jerry Lee Lewis wanting to murder Elvis? Or the hip-hop star who cannibalized his roommate? What about the murders AC/DC was blamed for? Or the suspicious deaths of Brittany Murphy and River Phoenix? These stories and more are told in the award-winning Disgraceland podcast hosted by me, Jake Brennan, every Tuesday, where I dive deep into the dark side of entertainment and the connection between music history and true crime. Blondie's lead singer, Debbie Harry, was shocked when she saw the man's photo in the newspaper. She recognized him. How could she forget? He'd given her a ride years ago. a ride she'd barely escaped from with her life. And now, here he was, right there on the front page, accused of kidnapping and killing at least 30 women. And now, Debbie Harry finally knew his name. Ted Bundy. Follow and listen to Disgraceland on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
I think one more thing, Chris, that we got to give Roy credit for here, very importantly, is at this point, he is one of probably the most sought-after producers. He had all this success with Queen, and he recognized in the Cars something special. He saw them perform in a Boston school gymnasium, and at that point, committed to produce 4 albums for them. Like, he saw something. Could you imagine seeing a band in a gymnasium and seeing something special, especially if you are someone who's had such crazy success? I think his ability to spot talent is something that's worth mentioning as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I see it here now. It was not 5. It was 4. The Cars, Candy-O, Panorama, and Shake It Up. He produced the 4 albums. And like you said, after he saw him, he would have been 31, 32 years old at this point, going to see the Cars in the mid-70s. How was this guy from Britain, this 31-year-old guy, how did he end up in a gymnasium in Boston?
He had to have his ear to the ground when it came to music, of course. I'm sure they had a buzz at that point. You and I did an after-party episode. Or no, we did a regular episode. We did a Rick Ocasek episode. You can go back in our catalog and check that one out. But just must have heard the buzz. I mean, that's part of it too, man. Being in tune to what's going on in music at the moment, you know? And if you see that there's a groundswell and a buzz with a band and recognizing something. I keep harping on the gymnasium thing just because I've played in a few gymnasiums in my day, and I realize how terrible the sound usually is in a gymnasium. You got it bouncing all over the place. But to see something, to hear something, and be like, there's something magic about that, I think that is awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. And, you know, after his success with Queen and other artists, Chris, he signed a multi-album production deal with CBS Music, which included Columbia Records, Sony Music, and Epic Records. He moved to the United States and set up RTB Audiovisual Productions in both New York City and Los Angeles. With his CBS deal, he produced Journey, Starcastle, Ian Hunter, and Ronnie Wood. I noticed that the Cars weren't in there. The Cars were not signed to CBS. So that shows you that he wasn't just, you know, trying to grab people under his CBS umbrella. He was still working with bands that possibly already had a deal, or, you know what, he didn't care. He wanted to produce this band. He loved the Cars so much, he didn't care where they went. He wasn't going to fight for them to maybe be on CBS. That's interesting too.
What label were the Cars on? I actually don't know the answer to that.
Why am I blanking on this? I can see it in my head. What label were the Cars on? Chris is going to check for us now.
I'm going to find out. The Cars.
Why can't I see it? I know every label. They weren't Atlantic. They weren't Epic.
Is it Elektra?
Elektra. They were on Elektra. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
They were on Elektra. Which, you know, at some point, Chris, all the labels they became one conglomerate.
Well,
so
right. This label stuff, these are all major labels. It's not like we're talking about Epitaph or something, or some indie record label. But funny enough, speaking of Elektra, after all his success with the Cars, he was offered the position of Senior VP of A&R for Elektra as executive and or producer with, this is just a laundry list of crazy artists at this point. And I will note, Chris, we talked about Queen, we talked about the Cars. The list of artists I'm about to read, I mean, they're all rock and roll, but so much different from each other. Lindsey Buckingham, Motley Crue. What did he do for Motley Crue?
So that's an interesting one. And this all is due to the fact that he was offered the post of senior vice president of A&R for Elektra. Motley was signed to Elektra. They had put out an independent record, their first album, Too Fast for Love. You can go find the original version online. It doesn't sound great. They recorded it for like $600 at some studio with some no-name engineer. when they got signed to Elektra, they wanted a remix, and Roy Thomas Baker came in for the remix. If you hear their song Livewire, you can hear a lot of phaser and stuff. So if there is something I could say that carried over, some of his Phase, Cars stuff did make it onto that Motley Crue mix. For the most part, Roy kept his fingerprints off of other people's stuff. But yeah, he mixed that album for Motley Crue. Past Chris DeMakes a podcast guest, Joe Lynn Turner, of course, who sang for Rainbow and Deep Purple. Also worked with Dokken. I think he mixed something from Dokken. And during Roy's tenure, Elektra signed Metallica, Simply Red, Yellow, and 10,000 Maniacs. So
what a crazy array of artists. First of all, he signed Metallica?
Yeah.
Is that...
Oh, I take that back. He did not sign Metallica, but he was there during that. Jason Flom signed Metallica. So, but he was there during that period. And he also produced the second record from The Darkness. It's called One Way Ticket to Hell and Back. Great sounding record. He produced that. And I think Justin Hawkins from Darkness is obviously such a huge Queen fan that it was his bucket list to probably work with Roy Thomas Baker. And let's talk about some of these songs, though. Killer Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, Don't Stop Me Now, and You're My Best Friend. Just those 4 songs are so incredibly different. Okay? You're My Best Friend is just like this beautiful, happy-go-lucky, I don't know, anybody from 6 years old to 70 could enjoy it.
What a feel-good song.
Yes.
You know, some of these songs, Don't Stop Me Now is such a feel-good song too, man. And then Killer Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody, they sound like they come from another century at certain parts of them. Yeah, so it's just, once again, a very wide range. He produced Lights by Journey.
When the lights go down in the city and the sun shines on the bay, ooh, I wanna be there.
It's just absolutely epic. And, you know, Journey was a bar band. Okay, and you can really hear it in that track. When you close your eyes and put that on, crank it up, it sounds like you're sitting in the room with a bar band during the verses. And I think that is part of the magic of Roy Thomas Baker, the producer that's able to capture that. A lot of producers want to take a band and mold them into something. Very, very few times does that work. Because now you're making art for commerce. You're not making it because it came from the heart. And guys like Rick Rubin, guys like Roy Thomas Baker, they go in and they take the heart and soul of this band and they say, you know what are the strong points here and what can I elevate and make better?
Right. And then, you know, some other standout tracks from Roy Thomas Baker's career. Just What I Needed, Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl from the Cars. These are all songs that have stood the test of time, still sound great.
I haven't talked too much about space on the show, but what I mean by that is when you're listening and it just sounds big in your head, we're like, okay, wow, the drums are taking up a lot of space in this mix, but wow, so's the guitar off to the left here. It's big, and you're like, you're sitting there wondering how did they get this spatial sound all the way back in the 70s? How did they know? Well, they knew because guys like this were 14 years old going into studios, listening, moving the mic back 2 feet, recording the drum getting hit, listening back and going, oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's take another mic and put it back 10 feet in conjunction with the one at 2 feet. Now we get the splash of the room back here. It was just experimentation, Chris.
Right.
How many hours did these guys have to experiment to get to where we are today? Thousands.
I think that is a very key point about great producers, especially someone like this guy who is such an innovator, is taking the time and making the effort to experiment and not just do things the way they've always been done. You know, we've heard stories on the podcast so many times. Oh, we heard the story recently when we had Nick Wheeler from All American Rejects on, where Eric Valentine, they had heard a story about, oh, dude, they heard a story. That's so funny. We're bringing it right back to Roy Thomas Baker. They heard a story. I guess it would have been Roy who recorded the song, Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon, where they took they mic'd something in a paint can,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would have been Roy right?
Was that Roy Thomas Baker that did that? I guess so.
Yeah.
But yeah, they again, these were just, hey, let's try this. Let's put a golf ball in a paint can. Let's take a pencil and knock the side of this and see what it sounds like. A lot of those Motown records were made like that. You know, the stomping with the snare drum. That was, hey, 10 people go put bells on your shoes and go jump in unison together. We're going to record that.
Yeah.
It's unreal. There were no rules back then. That's also something that I love about the recording techniques we were all learning. You can go back and listen to a lot of garage records from the 60s and 70s that sound terrible because they weren't recorded great. But hey, it all got us to where we're at now.
Yeah, and I got to say too, man, what you could say, what someone who's just trying to cash a paycheck or trying to cash in on whatever the current trend is, you could just be trying to emulate what's being played on the radio. Oh, these are the sounds, these are the tones, these are the arrangements, any number of things about songs that are already popular and proven. You could try to emulate that. And people like Roy Thomas Baker, there were no bands with an operatic section in the song, you know, making an 8-minute long song. And the fact that he was willing to take a chance, I think that's so cool. And there's still ways to do that today. You know, let this guy be an inspiration. If you're a creator out there, if you're a producer, if you're a songwriter, if something is popular and out there, don't try to emulate that. You're already too late. How many times have we said that, Chris? If you're trying to emulate what's already popular, you're already too late.
It's already passed.
Take a little inspiration from a guy like this who was like, an operatic section of the song? Sure, why not?
Well, and talk about sticking your neck out. You know, there's only so many hours in the day. We know how long it took to produce records back then. He had to commit and see a project through fully believing in it. You know, if he spent 9 months on a Queen record and it flopped, well, what's after that? You got to keep barreling ahead, and it was just one thing after another. You know, he went from Trident, he got signed to the deal over at CBS, ended up over at Elektra, just kept doing his thing, and that's why we wanted to honor the man, the myth, the legend here on Legends Amplified, what we call this episode with Roy Thomas Baker. I'm pretty proud of us, Chris. We didn't go off on too much of a tangent here.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff about him that's out there, you can go in a little YouTube deep dive. You can see the guy. You wouldn't know looking at him that he was this famous record producer or whatever. Maybe some of his outfits here and there you might know, but otherwise he's not much to look at. No offense, wherever you are now, Roy Thomas Baker, but definitely his willingness to be inventive and experiment and stuff. It's really, really cool, man. And yeah, I hope that maybe there's some people out there that didn't know this name. You know, I know that it's only been in recent years that I started caring more about like these legendary producers and stuff. If it wasn't a producer I was working with, what do I care? But now I realize how important these guys were to the music that I love, to the songs that I love. And sometimes you don't hear them talked about quite enough.
Yeah, well, we definitely talk about it on our show, how integral the producer can be and how important they can be to these songs. So we wanted to give Roy Thomas Baker a nod today. Thanks to everybody for listening. And once again, ChrisDeMakes.com is where you can support us on our Patreon and get extra episodes of The After Party where we ramble like this and maybe even a little bit more sometimes, Chris.
That's right. Yeah, it's a good place to go if you like what we're doing here at Chris DeMakes a Podcast. And yeah, once in a while, Chris and I like to do episodes like this where there isn't a guest and Chris and I, you know, focus in on an artist that's no longer with us or an artist that we know we aren't going to get on the show for one reason or another. But the After Party is our bonus episode every week that we do, where we do a lot of episodes like this. So if you like to hear Chris and I's perspective on music, or if you love Chris DeMakes a Podcast, you want to help us keep the lights on, ChrisDeMakes.com. That's our Patreon. Check it out.
That's right. Thanks to each and every one of you, and rest in peace to Mr. Roy Thomas Baker. We'll see you next week.
And now, a next-level moment from AT&T Business. Say you've sent out a gigantic shipment of pillows, and they need to be there in time for International Sleep Day. You've got AT&T 5G, so you're fully confident. But the vendor isn't responding, and International Sleep Day is tomorrow. Luckily, AT&T 5G lets you deal with any issues with ease, so the pillows will get delivered and everyone can sleep soundly, especially you. AT&T 5G requires a compatible plan and device. Coverage not available everywhere. Learn more at att.com/5G network. And now, a next-level moment from AT&T Business. Say you've sent out a gigantic shipment of pillows, and they need to be there in time for International Sleep Day. You've got AT&T 5G, so you're fully confident. But the vendor isn't responding, and International Sleep Day is tomorrow. Luckily, AT&T 5G lets you deal with any issues with ease, so the pillows will get delivered and everyone can sleep soundly, especially you. AT&T 5G requires a compatible plan and device. Coverage not available everywhere. Learn more at att.com/5G network.